part 2 this week. So, Phil, shall I pray for you?
Please do, yes.
Jesus, we know that this was something really important to you. You showed us in this particular way how to live a balanced life. And Jesus, as we go through this teaching, and specifically this morning, we ask that you would take what Phil has prepared and you would speak to each one of us something more on this subject, that we would be able, in a fresh way, to do what Jesus did. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Anne. Thank you. First of all, if you're joining us on the live stream this morning, you're very welcome. It's great to see you this morning. My name is Phil White. I'm the vicar here, and we're gathered Kingsbrook and Broughton Church. I've still got to work on that. Kingsbrook and Broughton Church, we're gathered here this morning at the school, at the Kingsbrook View Primary Academy. So it's great that you can join us this morning. As Anne's just mentioned, we are looking at Sabbath this month in October, 5 weeks in total. And if you're watching on the stream, you might hear children playing in the background. We've got our children with us. They're doing their own work at the back, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that later. We are in the year of the year of infectious faith. And infectious faith, having come out of COVID, everybody here has heard this every week, but I'm still saying it. Infectious faith, we came out of COVID knowing that COVID affects the whole of your body. Many of us have had it, but it was also very easy to pass it on. So we're seeking that our faith is the same, that it goes down, it reaches every part of us, but it's also easy to pass on. As I say, we're talking about Sabbath, and we did a bit of an introduction last week. And the question on my mind this morning is, how will taking a Sabbath actually give us an infectious faith? How will it deepen our faith? And I'll be quite honest with you, and for you at home as well watching, I would like every single one of us to try Sabbath this month. At least once. So please, will you try and work out which day, which week you're going to try to take a Sabbath. And we're telling you a little bit more about what it might mean and how it might benefit you. So that's what I'm wanting to do. And I'd love to hear the stories back of I heard someone yesterday telling me, I had a great Sabbath morning. And I thought, yes, fantastic. So please be prepared to come back and tell us your stories. But I am very aware that when we mention Sabbath, because last week we looked at what Sabbath was like when we were children, when we mention Sabbath, perhaps the initial response is negative, restricting, boring, and strict. My Sabbath, my Sundays when I was a child were not particularly strict, but I wasn't allowed to go to the cinema. I wasn't allowed to do certain things. So to some extent, I looked at it negatively. And I'm going to be quoting from two theologians this morning, Dan Allender in his book Sabbath, and Walter Brueggemann in his book Sabbath as Resistance. If you want to look at those later, please do let me know. But Dan Allender said this, and it should be on the screen, I think. There is no notion more at odds with the Sabbath than a day of forced quiet, spiritual exercises, and religious devotion and attendance. That is not Sabbath. In fact, if you think about it, that's exactly the fight that Jesus had with the Pharisees. Jesus was walking in the fields. The disciples were picking corn, and it was the Pharisees and the scribes and so on, the Sadducees, who were challenging him about that. We're going to just have a little sketch to set the scene. Anne, will you come and join me? Anne is not happy about this, but there you go. This is a typical evening at the White House.
Right, I thought that while I get dinner, Phil, I'd just make some flapjack for more and maybe tea cakes, and while the oven's on, make the most of the electricity.
Oh, hang on, and we've got to sign the papers.
Oh, just a minute, phone. Right, yeah. Yes, Mum, yeah, Mum, yes. No, thanks for ringing back. I just wanted to know, had you taken your tablets today? Okay, right. I'll speak to you later. Yeah, okay, bye.
The honey's coming on. Anyway, before I was rudely interrupted there, the solicitor says we need to just sign this. Can you quickly sign
what,
it?
Now?
Now, come on, because he
right.
said this. We've got to do it straight away.
Oh, you take it this time.
Oh, dear. Hello? Oh, hi, Mum. Hi. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Are you going out today then? You're okay now? Your leg's better now? Good, okay. All right, got to go because I'm a bit busy preparing a sermon. Yeah. All right, bye.
Oh, so what are you up to then?
Well, I'm just selling the Tranger on eBay.
What?
You remember this? The old stove,
that we've never actually used.
Well, we do use it occasionally. Well, no, I haven't used it for quite a while. Anyway,
right.
But I've got someone interested as well. Hang on, the honey's sieving as well. Yeah, okay. What are you doing now?
Oh, well, I've just finishing off the flapjack, and I've done the tea cakes. So
have you put the yeast in the tea cakes?
I know I did forget the yeast in the tea cakes 1 week, but they went in the bin, those ones.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay.
I'm done.
The end. We've run out of things to...
Not a typical eat.
Yeah, exaggerated. Walter Brueggemann, in that book, says, multitasking is the drive to be more than we are, to control more than we do, to extend our power and our effectiveness. Such practice yields a divided self with full attention given to nothing. There's no way that I could concentrate on sieving the honey, selling my Tranger, doing emails, signing the forms, talking to Anne, phoning Mum. It's just, you can't do it. It just adds to it madness. And Dan Allender makes another comment as well. We are driven, exhausted, and depleted. We were created for the refreshing and replenishing gift of the Sabbath, and we don't do so to our peril. If we would only take a weekly Sabbath, our lives would be more balanced and buoyant. Just have a reflect on that for a moment. What I want to talk about this morning is stopping. There's 4 things that Anne and I practice in our Sabbath. The first one is stop. The second one is rest. Third one is delight. And the fourth one is worship. And we're going to spend this week and the next 3 weeks looking at each one of those. But today is about stopping. I wonder what it's like in your household. Is it as mad as ours? I'm getting some shakes of the head. No? Those are retired people who were saying that, by the way. What's it like? Just have a reflection. Just have a think for a moment what it's like in your household. What we've just seen reminds me a little bit of Mary and Martha. You remember the story where Jesus and his disciples go to see Mary and Martha. Let me just read to you the passage. It will be on the screen, but if you want to, you can close your eyes and listen, imagine yourself there. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Jesus is not condemning housework. He's not condemning hospitality. Far from it. What he's actually saying is that intimacy with God is more important. And that's what we find genuinely when we take a Sabbath. We find we feel closer to God. Let's have a look now. We're going to jump back to the Old Testament, to one of the passages in the Old Testament which talks specifically about Sabbath. Now, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but when God gave the Ten Commandments inscribed, when Moses wrote them, or they were written on the stone tablets, they're recorded in Exodus, and they're also recorded in Deuteronomy. But it's fascinating to look at the two passages, because the Exodus commandment about Sabbath is quite different than the Deuteronomy passage about Sabbath. And I'm going to read the Deuteronomy one today, because this speaks specifically about stopping. So I'm going to read now from Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your maidservant or manservant or maidservant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor the alien within your gates, so that your menservant and maidservant may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. All right? That is a very different passage to the Exodus one. I'm not going to read the Exodus one now. We'll have that next week. But let me just tell you the difference between the two. The Deuteronomy passage, which I've just read there, the penultimate verse, says that you take a Sabbath because you were in slavery. You were slaves in Egypt. God brought you out. Therefore, take a Sabbath. The Exodus passage is very different. The Exodus passage says, take a Sabbath because God made the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Okay, so the Deuteronomy one, you were slaves in Egypt, therefore take a Sabbath. The Exodus one, God made the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, therefore take a Sabbath. Okay, so we're focusing on the Deuteronomy one today because it's the one that talks about being enslaved to things. It means we are slaves to various things in our lives. Anne and I were slaves to multitasking, to doing all these things at once, and we didn't have a moment to actually breathe almost. Walter Brueggemann again says, people who keep Sabbath live all 7 days differently. It affects the whole of your week. And for Anne and me, when we take a Sabbath, what stopping for us means, so we're looking at stopping today. What stopping means for Anne and myself is that we go to a cafe to read. We find somewhere where we are on the way back from something or whatever it is. We go to a cafe, we have a coffee, and we sit and read. Now, that's not reading my latest novel about a murder in Brighton, or the Cicero series, if you know that, from the Roman period at BC. It's not reading a novel. What we choose to do is we take a book that we read that feeds our soul. So I love reading John Eldridge, if you've ever read any of his books. A lot of them about how to build our soul up. So I read something that enriches me, that feeds me. And I tell you, we love it, absolutely love it. Sitting in a cafe, taking time just to read something that will build us up. On our Sabbath, which is our Friday for us, we try to have a meal that is already ready for us, that we've cooked earlier in the week. We simply have to put in the oven or the microwave to heat up, so that we're not cooking. We try not to shop on that day. So I don't buy anything on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. I don't search for things like that on my Sabbath, because I want to get away from that sense of getting more stuff. And personally, this is just personally for me, but the phone, which is there recording at the moment, the phone is a real problem for me on my Sabbath. So I choose to leave my phone in my bedroom for the whole day. It stays up in the bedroom, and I don't touch it. Now, the reason I have to do that is because it's too distracting for me. If you come into our kitchen, you'll find a chest freezer there, or a tall freezer. And I keep my phone on the corner of that every day in the kitchen. And every time I walk by, I pick it up and just see whether anyone's messaged me, whether anyone likes me, anyone wants to contact me. Do you know the feeling? Has anyone bothered to contact me today? It's distracting. I get drawn into acquiring. I'll check Facebook Marketplace to see whether anyone's selling a G-clamp, which I want, or whether anyone's messaged me about my Trangia that I've got for sale. It's all about buying and selling if I'm not careful. And I find it to be addictive. And this may surprise you, but the iPhone was invented in order to distract us. That's what they put the whole thing together for. It was to distract. It takes my attention. So I don't email, I don't WhatsApp message, I'm cut off, as it were. How do I manage without my phone? Actually, it's brilliant. I love it. I absolutely love not having my phone on me because I almost get more space. I've stopped using my phone. It gives me more space. But what we do, and Anne doesn't find this, Anne doesn't quite get it the same. Anne doesn't worry about the phone so much as me. So Anne takes the phone when we go out, so that if the family do need to get in touch or we need to phone the 999 or whatever, we can do that because it doesn't cause Anne a problem. Maybe if you don't take a phone out, let your family know that you've not got your phone on you that day. They'll cope. They'll ring you on the landline if you've got one. Or maybe if the actual technology of a smartphone is the problem, get the old dumb phone which only takes calls. Then you can't do WhatsApp or Facebook Marketplace or whatever. I had to ask myself the question, Phil, at first I struggled with the idea of putting my phone down. And if I'm struggling with the thought of not having my phone for 24 hours, am I more addicted to it than I perhaps cared to admit? Sabbath, says Walter Brueggemann, another quote from here, is the refusal to let one's life be defined by production and consumption and the endless pursuit of private well-being. Sometimes we get caught up with acquiring and producing and consuming. So as I come in to finish, what does stopping bring to us on the Sabbath? And I'm not making this up. This is genuine. We look forward to our Sabbath each week. It doesn't always happen very well, but when it works well, this is what we feel. This is what we experience. We experience a greater degree of calm. We just feel a lot more relaxed. We find that we've got more time to do things because we've stopped everything else, or not everything else, but a lot of things. The four things are stop, rest, delight, and worship. We find that we are more aware of the beauty around us. We're more aware of the lovely things that happen in our lives because we can focus to a greater extent on them. We're more thankful. And we are more aware of God. God. It's not that God comes and stands in front of us, but he's there anyway. It's that we notice him to a greater extent. And honestly, genuinely, we feel closer to God. Dan Allender, in I think the last quote, last quote. The Sabbath, therefore, is not merely a day to stop working. It is a day to renounce all activity that impoverishes, enslaves, or demeans others. It is a day set aside not to take or to procure, but to nourish and to give. Indeed, it is a day to dream and to hope. What might you decide to stop on a Sabbath? Think about it. What might you decide to cut out, to remove, to stop, that would give your life a bit more space? Sometimes I think we think, oh no, I could never stop that. I've got to do that. I've got to find time to do that. If you take 24 hours off the 168 hours total in a week, you've still got 144 hours left. And we can certainly fit those things elsewhere. The things that I've just described, feeling calmer, more time, more thankful, more aware of God, genuinely closer to God, that to me sounds like an infectious faith, a faith that's going deep into the whole of my day, the whole of my life. And what I'd like to do is to end with a short prayer, which will come on the screen. And this, again, this was written by Dan Allender, I think it was. Can we say it together? Lord, I come to you for a deep rest today. I spend so much of my life dissatisfied, wanting more stuff, more money, more friends, more applause, more miracles. Today I put away my superhero cape and thank you very simply that because I have you, I have everything I will ever truly need. Amen.
Just going to have some prayer now. So I think the words of the